Welcome back, everybody, to episode 13 of the Back Lounge podcast. My name is Tank. I'm your host, and I'm a roadie with over 15 years of experience in the touring music industry. And if this is your first time joining us on the podcast, what we normally do here is invite bands, artists, other roadies, and at this point, really just anybody else, and we just have conversations about whatever we feel like talking about. And for today's episode, we once again have another very special guest, guitarist Lucas Gabb of the UK metal band InVisions. Now, before we get started, probably just throw it out there that this episode was actually recorded in May of this year. So it's been about a month between it recording and being released to everybody. So there's a couple things in this video that might be dated at this point, specifically stuff about them touring. The tour dates that we talk about in this podcast have already happened. They've played those shows, but they still have a lot of other stuff coming up as well. And I really loved this conversation, man. We get a lot of different personalities on the channel and a lot of different conversations. And this one was cool because it was very honest and open. And we talked about a lot of different stuff. Mainly one of my favorite things was really being honest about what it's like being in a band and adjusting your life, whether it's finances or relationships and stuff like that. And I think a lot of it is not what people would think. And Lucas was very honest and open about how it is being in an unsigned band, because they are still currently unsigned, which is wild to me because they put out a fantastic album earlier this year. Their full studio album, Deadlock, came out on February 11th, 2022. And it was released from their own imprint, even though it did have distribution by Blood Blast, which is with Nuclear Blast. But yeah, as of now, unsigned band, which is wild because they had so many awesome things come up this summer already, man. They did some tour dates with Spiritbox and Aviana and Ice Nine Kills, and they played at Hellfest. And for the rest of the summer, they've got tons of other festival dates and then another tour. So if you want to keep up with these guys, you can head over to InVisionsOfficial.com, see their news, their tour dates, support them by buying some merch, check out their releases. Pretty much that's the hub for anything you want from these guys. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll have links in the description where you can check out their social medias and follow them there as well. And speaking of where you're watching this or listening, just as a reminder, the video versions are available on my YouTube channel, and the audio versions are available on Spotify, Google, Apple, and pretty much anywhere else you can listen to a podcast. So whether you like to see us on screen or just want to listen while you're doing other things, all of those options are available to you. But without wasting any more time, let's just jump into this conversation. It's about 2 hours. It's got a lot of good stuff, and hopefully you enjoy it. So let's welcome to the podcast, Lucas Gabb of InVisions. Lucas, welcome to the podcast, dude. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate you taking the time out to chat.
Of course, man. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
So it's my kind of Friday night, this.
Yeah. Just nice and easy. Just, sit on a computer and talk to somebody on the other side of the ocean,
Well, that's it, mate. If anyone wants to talk about music, I'm your guy. I'm like, sit there and just jabber for days. So yeah. It's nice when someone wants to actually hear what you've got to say.
For sure. And that's why I like this podcast, is because as we've talked about, and I know you said you heard an episode at least, we could just talk about whatever. And with you guys, there's a lot to talk about because a lot's happened. I mean, new album, crazy touring schedule coming up, festival seasons coming up. We'll get into tons of stuff.
It's been a pretty exciting year for us, to be fair. Definitely what was not something we always hoped for, things to kind of get the ball rolling with the new record, but never expected everything that's already happened and what's continuing to happen. It's a lot of very exciting things going on. Every time your phone's going off, you're ripping it out of your pocket to find what the next piece of good news is. It's,
for sure. Exciting. And for me, you guys kind of came out of nowhere, if I'm being honest. A lot of this YouTube thing for me has been discovery for a lot of bands from the other side of the world. And, whether it's UK, a lot from Germany, Finland, Sweden, mostly Europe. But, It was a wild trip when I first discovered your band, because you guys, when did you officially form? Was it like 2016?
Yeah, bang on, mate. It was 2016. So we've been around the block like quite a minute, to be fair. But I think yes, so we formed like 2016. I think we released our first song in 2017. It was like October 16. Like me, Ben, and Alex, the other guitar player. So us three kind of met in a bar after like our other bands had split up, just floating the idea of like, do we really want to, be in a band again? Are we like, if we're gonna get the ball rolling on something, are we kind of willing to do it? It takes up your life, it's a huge commitment. So we were kind of like, if we're gonna get involved with it again, it has to be the one. It has to work, otherwise that's kind of it's done for all of us. Like. So we always like from day one, it was like, right, everything on the line. And then within a week, we were in the studio recording the first single, which was pretty crazy. But yeah, so definitely a good couple of years. Like, I think, so we lost 2 years to COVID. Let's take that out of the equation. Sorry, that's, we're pushing like 6 years as a band now, but 3 records, I think 3 records and then like 4 singles, which is
I mean, that's a lot
fairly
of work.
fast moving.
Yeah, it's a lot of work for that time. Did you and Ben and Alex, did you guys know each other from other bands in that scene?
Yeah, so me and Alex have been in bands together for, like since we were like 13 or so. We lived in like the street next to each other, so we'd always play guitar together. But Ben, he actually started doing vocals because he saw like mine and Alex's old band play, so he started doing vocals, and then we kind of stopped being in bands. He was in a band and did really got really fucking good really quickly. And he kind of came up to us when his band split up and was like, look guys, like I want to start a project, are you guys up to? We didn't really know him. Like we knew of him, but weren't familiar with, his personality or anything like that. But about 16 pints later, we started a band and, and then 7 years we're still stuck with each other. So
that sounds like how a lot of bands start. I've heard that story where it's like, yeah, well, I think when Joachim from Sabaton was on here, I was like, how did you guys start? And he's like, he's like, me and Per happened to be at the same party and we're drunk and we're just like, let's start a band.
Yeah, it's like stereotypical, like, dude, we should start a band. You're like, yeah, that's a great idea, let's start a band.
Yeah.
And the next morning, you fucking look at your Toman account and it's absolutely murder with purchases, and okay, I guess this is happening.
Oh yeah, dude, it's actually kind of crazy. Like, so before I started working for bands, I was in a band from the Chicago local scene, and it's kind of crazy because it's similar to that story. Is like I was in a previous band, and I had always watched this other band play all the time, and I was like, man, I would love to be in that band. And then when they were looking for a bass player, I ended up auditioning and joined. So it was like all these local scenes are super tight. Like everybody knows everybody, and
big time. I was said to like a lot of the guys now, like, we've got a lot of peers who are, in, substantially bigger bands than like, we are. And it's this little thing, something like I try and personally make sure we bring across when we work with anybody, is that everyone walks away from working with our band or any kind of like experience with the band is like, oh, that band were mint to work with. And it's like those little interactions, like you say, they probably saw you play at a show at some point, maybe you supported them and they were like, that guy's sick. It's like, maybe that doesn't mean it's not like a big moment to you, but to them, that could have been the moment they went, right, if we ever need a bass player, he's the guy.
Yeah.
And I think it's like vital in the music industry. Everyone's always on the lookout for the raw talent.
Dude, it works the same way with Roadies. Like every gig I've ever had, whether I was a tech or merch manager for a band or whatever, I've always gotten a gig from somebody else in the industry that remembered me from another gig that when they needed somebody just called. So I have that same mentality. Like it doesn't matter where I'm working, even if it's like the local stagehands and stuff. I always want everybody, whether it's the band or the local stagehands or whatever, to walk away being like, that guy was great to work with. And that's the mentality I've always kept. And I mean, even over COVID, it's been known. I've told everybody in the industry that knows me, like, my wife and I had a kid. I'm going to take this time off to see her grow up and, figure it out in the meantime. And every single week I'm getting calls to go guitar tech for bands. And I'm like, I can't. Like,
yeah, for sure.
And
it's a good position to be in, though. It's better than, and we're going like, holy shit, like that wasn't that guy was, we don't want him on at all, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So
And to be fair, I know that probably sounded really arrogant, like everybody wants me.
not at all.
COVID has made it very difficult for tours to staff people right now because a lot of these roadies went out and got other jobs in the meantime. So
Dude.
I would guess like probably like 40% of all the roadies that I know in town in Nashville here have gone on to do other things and aren't touring. So when I do get those calls, it's like, hey, we're in a bind. Can you come out? And if not, do you know somebody? Because like big bands are having a hard time staffing people right now.
Mate, it's crazy. Like, obviously we've got some stuff going on in Europe. I think starts in like 2 weeks from now. It's the 6th today. Finding, van rentals and, front of house. Like, honestly, there's a group on Facebook which is called like UK Touring Crew, which is, where everyone's kind of involved with, if you need any answers, that's the place to go. Everyone's like, it's just a great community. And all it is at the moment is like, has anyone got a 9-seater? Has anyone got this? Has anyone got a bus? Like, there's so many bands in Europe this summer that simply because people, like you say, people have changed jobs, people have had to find other sources of income, that now that the music industry is booming again, probably more so than it ever was, there's not enough staff to physically facilitate it. And same with like vans, like half these van rentals have now gone to being like Amazon delivery drivers.
Yeah.
So like, if your favorite band can't make a show because the van's not there, it's probably Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, it's going the same way with like even bus companies. So like I live in Nashville, which is, a lot of people think it's the hub for country music, but there's a lot of bands here now. There's a lot of rock bands here. There's a lot of metal bands here. And I think this is probably one of the easiest cities in the country to find things for touring. There's like 10 different bus and van companies here. There's 5 or 6 different rental companies, like just big names. There's other ones too. And even right now with the how crazy touring schedules are for people in the States, it's insane. Like I'm trying to help Electric Callboy book this stuff for their US tour. And I reached out to one of the bus companies that I have a good relationship with. It was like, hey, these guys need a bus for this tour in October. They're like, we're going to need to book it fast if that's the case, because we have nothing right now. Like 50 buses on the road right now. They have nothing else that they can spare.
It's crazy. And literally had that exact same conversation about trying to find something for these Spiritbox dates. It was, everyone was like, they're like, yes, we can get one. You have to book it now. And, someone else was like, we might have some new ones finished by that point. And, you kind of sat there like, we just confirmed these shows. These shows are a big deal to us. And it's like, if we can't get there because of logistics, that's going to be, the biggest kick. But yeah, managed to pan it out. I feel like that's the situation, like obviously you see you're helping Electric Callboy. I feel like you're probably doing a bit of like a TM ahead of the tour kind of thing, doing some logistical stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they have a solid production team and tour manager, but them being based in Europe and not touring over here regularly, it's more of like, I'm kind of just being the introduction to a lot of these companies that I know. And then I'm just like, once I'm like, okay, you have what they need, dots, like, I'm going to connect you with them. Yeah. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. But like that kind of thing is, it's super helpful and super useful. But like the amount of hoops you've got to jump through now, as opposed to what it used to be, it's insane.
Yeah.
Like I've had many conversations with the lads, like when we've been trying to sort things out, and I was like, fucking hell, I feel like Metallica at this point, trying to make things work. Every day there's a new problem, and you're like, I remember when we used to just jump in the van and, obviously there's loads of like crazy complications like Brexit and stuff as well, and COVID. So for us to even, like, you used to be able to just drive into Europe. It was easier for us to play a show in Europe than it was for us to play a show in, like, I don't know, down south in the UK somewhere. It was that simple. Whereas now there's loads more red tape, and you got to love red tape when you're a small independent band, trying to.
Yeah. I mean, one of the last podcasts I filmed was with Ali from Bleed From Within. He was saying the same thing. They're getting ready to tour, and he's like, dude, I've been sitting here for like 2 days trying to write out this carnet just to go to Europe, because I didn't even think about that. He's like, since Brexit, he's like, it's literally like touring internationally for anybody. Like, we have to have all of our paperwork in order. We can't just easily go somewhere. Like, he's like, it's more of a pain in the ass than anything else right now.
It is, yeah. It's annoying, and like particularly when you're in the UK, like you nip back and forth to Europe so much. Like, you know, in 2019, when we kind of first started doing European touring, we spent more time in Europe than we did in the UK. And, you know, now because now we have to get this like carnet stamped in the UK and stamped in France and all this kind of stuff. That's going to add extra couple of hours to the trip each way. Mm-hmm. And then it's also like, you know, I'm not a logistics expert. I'm not an import export. You know, we're just a couple of guys who play guitar and managed to get lucky, and people have said, "Come play in our country." You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a whole new world. Like, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy the business aspect of, I guess, like that side of it. It keeps you busy, but yeah, I'm excited for when we get to a point when I can just get someone else to look after it. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure, man. And it's like, the preparation for tours is brutal sometimes. It's like, you know, a lot of people that go to shows, they see their favorite bands on stage, and, you know, that's all they really think about. And that's all they need to think about. They paid to go see a show and that's it. But the preparation that goes into some of these tours and the logistics that need to get worked out, I mean, it's pretty stressful for a lot of these bands until they finally get on tour and go, you know. It's actually almost easier once you get on tour.
Mate, yeah, 100%. That's kind of like my philosophy with it. Is like, do all the pre-game work to make it, you know, get them day sheets down to the T, so like when you're actually traveling, you know what's going on and you can kind of enjoy it, because, you know, it's a great experience. Touring is like fantastic for, you know, for any musician, any part of the crew. Like, it's a really, really unifying experience. I'm sure, like, you know, you'll know better than I will. But it's something you can't quite explain to someone who's never done it. But it's just yeah, it's literally the best. So excited to get back to Europe and experience that again once we get past all the bullshit.
Yeah, that's a lot of. It's funny you say that, because a lot of people, a lot of my friends that aren't in the music industry, they see what we do, and, you know, they see our Instagram posts of us traveling and stuff like that, and they're like, "Oh, this must be so cool." And like, they only see a fraction of what we're actually doing, and it's like, dude, there's so much little stuff that goes behind this. Like, when I tell people, for example, it's like, yeah, you know, one of the last things we did before COVID was we did some international touring and stuff, and we went to Europe and we went to Australia, and people are like, "Oh, that's so cool. Like, so like you got to go explore and stuff like that, right?" And I was like, hell no. Half the time when we're in these cities, like, unless we have a dedicated day off in a city, it's like, I'm in the venue all day. Like, as far as I'm concerned, the only thing that exists in Dublin, Ireland is the Olympia Theatre. You know what I mean? Like, that's literally all 100%. Yeah.
It is work, man. Like, that's the thing. You get into a venue and it's non-stop, you know. People, you know, it's difficult because you're there until you've loaded out and you're literally sat there in that van or whatever. That is the moment when you get like a brief bit of time to be like, right, breathe, you know, because there's always something to do. And I think, I mean, you could be lazy and you could not necessarily do stuff, but those moments of those shows, like the amount of work you put in during those days, it affects the show and it affects everything for, you know, everyone's experience, including the band and, you know, the people coming to the show.
Yeah, and unless you're a band that has a full crew, there's so much stuff that you guys as band members probably have to do every day too. Like, let's not even talk about the stuff that you have to do to set up for the show. Your load-ins, your load-outs, you're working on guitars. Like, there's media that you guys have to do. There might be radio appearances. It's like, dude, a band your guys' size, by the time you actually have to play a show, you've probably already been burned out from like 8 hours of doing other shit that has nothing to do with playing music. You know?
Oh, mate, it's crazy. Like, that's it. You know, the first thing I do on a day of like touring, you know, there's social media posts to be put out. There's spreadsheets to be done in terms of like, you know, what merch was sold, like tracking all that kind of stuff. There's a huge amount of like just straight up, it's just business. That's what it is, just straight up like business stuff to do before you even arrive at the venue. But yeah, you know, I'm a massive gear nerd myself, so like always trying to make everything as simple as possible to maybe not load in because, you know, racks are a bitch, but but to as quickly as possible to actually get set up and make, you know, changeovers and our lives as simple as possible in that kind of sense. But yeah, it's a long process, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. Dude,
I say that to people all the time, man. Like, I became a roadie because I was in my band. The last band I was in for about 3 years, and we toured all over North America. Like, it was a blast. It was just 5 of us in a van and trailer all the time. Like we had no crew, no nothing. And I quit the band because if I'm being honest, I was tired of the grind at that point. I was broke all the time. I literally had like $5 in my pocket at all times. Like there were days where I literally had to borrow like $2 from one of my guitar players to get like McDonald's or something just to eat. And I just got tired of just, being a broke musician. So I started working for bands. But all that being said, I still wouldn't trade it for anything. Like I made some of the best memories and had some of the best times. And, all of that led me to where I got now. And you say you're a gear nerd. And I actually wanted to talk to you about this because the album that just came out in February, Deadlock, which was fucking great, honestly.
Thank you, man.
When you first hear of a band, I don't know if you can relate to this, but when somebody first tells you about a band, you never know what to expect. It's hard to get really excited about something that you don't know anything about. So all I knew about InVisions was the 3 singles that I heard before the album came out.
Yeah.
And then when I got the album, normally when I get a new album, I like to sit back here with no distractions and just listen start to finish. Like I really take it in.
I like that. I respect that.
Oh, to me, it's the best thing to do for somebody that's put the time into that music. The first time you listen to it, no distractions, take it all in,
experience it as opposed to kind of just like passive listen. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I like that.
So I didn't do that with your record. I couldn't wait. That was why.
Oh, that's even better. That's even better.
The record came out, and I was doing a bunch of stuff back here. I think I was working on guitars or something, but I just turned it on. Even though I was doing other things, I turned it on. I was like, I want to listen to this now. And sometimes when I'm listening to music, it's just kind of background noise. But there were so many points on that album that I heard something while I was working that I had to stop and be like, oh, damn, I got to start this song over and listen. Like immediately.
That is awesome.
The first track on the record, is it 669, right? The 669?
Yeah, the 669, yeah.
Is there a significance to that number?
Not necessarily the number, no. It was, that song was inspired by a film on Netflix called Spree. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't.
It's about like a spree driver, which is basically like an Uber driver, but he goes on like a live stream killing spree because he's so desperate to be famous. And that whole song's just about like how social media is like, it's just crazy. Honestly, it's hard to keep up with, and it's intense pressure. Like, so it's that kind of thing of like, what price would you put on, selling your soul to just have that moment in the limelight? And that was it, 669. So it's like, that's your price you pay kind of thing.
Damn.
That was it's a 669 to expose your idol. Like,
yeah, damn, dude. That's pretty wild. I mean, that first track though, immediately is like, it almost feels like a statement on that record. Like you guys purposely wanted that right there. Cause right out of the gate, it's like, it hits so hard and it's in your face that you're like, all right, that's what this is going to be. It's like, it's a great placement for that track on the album.
Appreciate it.
But yeah, the album was fantastic. I had so many times when I first listened that I had to stop and go back, and I wanted to hear parts again. And then I finally listened to the whole thing from start to finish. And there's a lot of like bands in the metalcore area that are out right now. And one of the things that I've said many times is that if you're going to be in a metal band nowadays, you have to do something that makes people remember you and stands out, because let's be real, dude, there's 1,000 bands that sound very similar in the same genre.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. There's so many, like, it's a great lane to be in, but we're all doing the same things. It's just trying to find something that's slightly that you can take ownership on. Yeah,
and you did a great job with that with the album, because after one listen, there were songs that I already had in my head that I was like, banger, banger, banger. Okay, I'm gonna go back and listen again. And that's a very good thing when you can listen to a record for the first time and remember specific songs. So now leading into the gear nerd part about this, you engineered the recording of that record, right?
Yep. It's the first ever album I've engineered in my entire life as well, which is
no way.
Pretty crazy. Yeah, man. It's like the guys that we record with, so Sam and Joe Graves at Inner Sound Audio. So we've grown up with Sam and Joe. They always engineered our bands. Like they learned a lot of stuff from Joey Sturgis back in the day. They actually lived in America for a while in Arizona with Ben Bruce and some of the Asking guys, and they produced one of the Asking records. So we've worked with them for many a year. And I've always just been super, super interested in recording music, and basically anything to do with music. To be honest, I'm just a freak about it. And yes, I've worked with them. I know their kind of like recording techniques, and over the years, like we've always done, pre-production ourselves of the records, and then kind of taking it into them. But at this stage, it was when we recorded Gold Blooded. Like I did a pre-production version of that track, and then we went into the studio and re-recorded it. And honestly, not that much changed. And I was like, well, maybe, we started actually trying to emulate things that I'd done in the pre-production, which kind of, at that point, it kind of felt to me like, why are we trying to recreate this when, like the pre-production versions of this record, let's say pre-production, the majority of it ends up in the record. Like I track them as I write. So I think it's the only way I can actually like commit to leaving something alone. Like if it's tracked, I'm like, tracked and edited, I'm not going to go back. If I'm willing to do that, it's kind of cements it. So yeah, I learned a lot of like their techniques, and I kind of spoke to them ahead of it. I was like, look, here's an example of what I'm kind of like doing. Is this going to be something that we can, take it from the stage of me finishing this on my computer, and then just take the project to you? Like we both use Cubase. So, the integration's fairly easy. I was like, is this going to be something that I can then bring across to you, and we can, mix it from there? And he was like, yeah. He said that honestly, I get stems from people who are working in professional studios that aren't this quality. So yeah, we're in a good kind of light. But yeah, I mean, it was it kind of obviously panned out as soon as COVID happened, because that was something that would have obviously meant that we would have had to delay the record if we were then going to go record it. But it was quite a cathartic process, and also very, very stressful, because all of a sudden it's on me. Do you know what I mean? Like if something doesn't work, if I can't figure something out, because we're producing it ourselves as well, it's down to us to kind of figure out the problems, as opposed to kind of, you never get a point where you go, oh, this bit doesn't really work, but we'll worry about that later. Like there's a couple of tracks on the record where we sat on them, like, particularly vocally, we sat on them for 6 to 8 months. We started that song first, and it was like the last song we finished because things just weren't gelling. But doing it itself made that we could do that, which was it was a great experience. It's something I probably would like to do again. Like even if we work like on the next record, if we work with a producer, I'd definitely like to take the album to a 9.5 of like mostly tracked and done, and then go in, take any kind of like production notes, and then kind of make those changes at home myself with the guys, and then kind of like go from there. But it was definitely interesting. I think the biggest benefit of that was the vocal writing. So like myself and Alex, the guitar player, we do all the vocal writing as well, which is something that's kind of like, I guess, not necessarily orthodox in a lot of bands. But like I do some of the vocals with Ben live, and we've always kind of had a great like relationship and similar kind of like ranges of, and styles, I guess. Mainly I'm impersonating him, to be honest, but but we can sit there, and because like as guitar players, we can sit there and write kind of melodies in a different mindset, as opposed to just kind of like putting words to something, writing a script and then trying to find a way to fit it into this section. We always go melody and like rhythmic patterns first. And that's a huge thing for us, with screaming as well. Like I think a lot of bands scream, and a lot of bands scream in a sense where it's just not musical. So having, taking like hip hop influences to having a pattern and having a flow where like, you've got all your music, and with metal, you've got so many different syncopated things going on all the time. You need the vocal to really accent that and have its own groove. Like if you're going to follow this vocal line whilst you've got something contradicting it, in the rhythm section or in the guitar, it needs to be that good that you're being pulled to want to follow it, as opposed to just being like, It's just mint guitar, and we've got just rah 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 rah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you can just get lost. Sorry.
No, no, it's fascinating to me because it seems like a lot of metal vocalists nowadays that I've either talked to or seen interviews with, a lot of people are very influenced by hip hop when they write vocals now. Like Phil from Whitechapel, I saw him do an interview with Mark from Cardivox Academy, and he's like, some of my favorite stuff that I listen to is like rap. I think he specifically mentioned like 3 6 Mafia or something, and he goes, you can hear that if you listen to my vocals on the songs. You can hear the flow, and some of the patterns I do are very, they're more hip hop than metal. And then I recently had Alex from Malevolence on here, and he told me, he's like, dude, he's like, I listen to so much Afrobeat and gangster rap and stuff, and he's like, that's where I get a lot of those patterns, is the vocal delivery from that stuff rather than just screaming over something. And
Mate,
I've said it on reactions a ton. I love when I hear metal vocalists that are actually going for their voice might be harsh, but they're actually going for pitch and melody and stuff rather than just using their voice as another distorted instrument. And
sure.
don't get me wrong, I definitely like some of my metal to just have that rah rah rah, but
Yeah.
you're seeing it a lot more that these vocalists are definitely adding pitch, and then you guys do blend like, you know, cleans and harsh and stuff like that. It's really cool, man. The vocals aren't just another thing on there. It's really what carries a lot of those parts.
I appreciate it. Like it was a huge thing for us because, like, Ben's he's a screamer first and foremost. He only really started singing on like our first record. That was like the first time maybe the second time he'd actually performed singing. But we were trying to find the perfect balance for us because we didn't necessarily want to be one of those bands that's like, okay, heavy versus clean choruses, and like at times we can be quite heavy in terms of the scream style. I suppose some of them are quite a bit more like deathcore than I suppose like progressive. But we wanted the choruses like in this song, we wanted them to feel like not like okay, here's the clean section. We wanted to go like, wow, I'm so glad that happened.
Yeah.
I wanted the intensity to match the intensity. Like if you're up here all verse and then all of a sudden you get the chorus and it's like down here, you're like, all right, let's get rid of that and get back to here. We wanted it to be like, you're constantly moving up. So when the chorus hits, it's like that, like, thank God that actually happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like having those pushed, it's like pitched, pushed, like cleans. Obviously, the normal thing is always everyone's like, Sam Carter's, definitely a huge inspiration for stuff like that. But it goes back to Linkin Park, Machine Head, like Trivium. Like I remember watching the Shogun, making a Shogun by Trivium when I was like a kid, and Matt Heafy was talking about it then. He was emulating Rob Flynn, from Machine Head. It's always been a staple in metal to have that kind of like distortion on the vocal. It's just expressive. You feel that, like, at the end of the day, a lot of metal songs are quite dark, and this album particularly is quite a it's not a sad album, but it's quite a deep and I guess a bit of like a desperate album. And to have just a straight clean cut clean vocal would feel kind of disingenuous because there's a certain amount of like emotion and pain that is expressed by that.
Great point. I've always thought that too. Like, Vicky from The Agonist has talked about that, where she's like, there are a lot of vocalists now have a lot of, maybe not necessarily schooling, but technique practice, where their technique is just really, really through the roof, and they can switch between cleans and harshes. But she's like, what I always loved about a lot of these older metal bands, and she specifically mentioned like a lot of the Gothenburg, like mellow death bands and stuff. And then even for me, again, when I was younger, dude, the first 4 Machine Head albums for me were like staples of my youth, dude. I can't tell you how many times I listened to like Burn My Eyes and The More Things Change and The Burning Red and all that stuff. And there's a certain sense of feel with a vocalist that doesn't necessarily have all that technique that everybody has now, where you can feel that emotion and that power through the voice. And it's a special thing, in my opinion. Like, I finally listened to the new Rammstein single yesterday, And there's a part in that song where Till like screams, and he doesn't scream a lot. And dude, I mean, I right when I heard it, I was almost speechless. I was like, God, the emotion and power you hear and feel in that is fucking maddening. Like that's what I love.
Smart writing, and being
Yeah.
like, using that point to express yourself as opposed to kind of like it just being like a placement of, okay, we need melody here. Like, don't wrong, melody is super important. That was something that we were, 100% like the choruses on this record cannot be throwaway. The melodies have to be earworms. It has to be something that you're going to want to scream at the top of your voice. But having that kind of like explosion of emotion is where I think that, it's the fight or flight moment. Someone's going to listen to it. And if that lands, it's going to be like, this is my favorite song. That's the difference between just being like a disposable listen or, disposable singles, which is kind of like a lot of the culture with metalcore particularly, or having an album that like, you can listen to it from start and end and feel like you've actually learned something about yourself.
Yeah.
And that was the goal for us, that this record, like we've done a few albums now. Like we've not done a perfect album yet, and this is our best attempt up to this point of trying to achieve, a perfect album.
Yeah, and you guys did great, man. It's a fucking great album. And the crazy thing is too, there's so many things about this I want to ask about because are you guys currently unsigned?
Yeah, dude.
Like, yeah,
independent,
Yeah, so I saw when the record came out, it said it was released by Narrative Records, and immediately I was like, that's got to be their imprint. Like, that has to be their
Yes,
thing,
that's
right?
something that we... so the album's distributed via Blood Blast Distribution, which is a subsidiary of Nuclear Blast.
Okay.
So Narrative Records is a label that is kind of like set up with our management to release this album, basically.
Yeah.
It was our way of kind of working with Blood Blast Distribution, kind of getting a lot of their resources to help us promote the record, without it being like, a fully signed, fully fledged deal. Like, we got a great opportunity with, having that option. Everyone at Nuclear Blast, we get a lot of support from Nuclear Blast, considering we're not technically, not paying the bills to them or anything. It's still an independent release. They've been absolutely fantastic to us. And it's been a cool experience. Like, we've released independently before. We did release an album on Stay Sick Recordings, which is like become Modern Empire. That was like the last record. But then when that kind of term was ended, we did look at other labels and stuff, but nothing just seemed to pan out with the timeline that we kind of wanted for the album. We have a kind of an internal rule that we have to release something every year. Doesn't matter, without fail, something has to be released, whether it's a single, whether it's a record. And because of the way we were doing it, recording ourselves, we were getting the artwork being completed whilst with the album still being written. The album was being mixed whilst the album was still being tracked and written. It was super like it was a super long way of doing it, which is like strange, but it's also good for us because some of like the earlier songs which became singles, they're quite old songs to us now, but like some of the later ones that we finished were a lot closer to being new for us as they were for people when we released them. So you still get that like awesome love factor. But I'm sure you've experienced it when when you write a record and you sit on it for too long, you start to question whether it's any good. You lose like perspective of the work you've put into it and whether it's even decent. So like to have that process kind of continue, so we were still writing new songs as we were kind of like going through that process, was quite nice, because it kept like the energy levels up and the excitement up through the process, as opposed to being like, right, that door's closed, now let's do the business side of it.
Yeah, it's kind of wild because admittedly, that's actually how I discovered your band. Was I have a friend that does work with Nuclear Blast. It's like, hey, check this band out. I was like, oh, is this one of yours? And she's like, no. I was like, oh, really? She's like, I mean, we're going to distribute their new record, but they're not a Nuclear Blast band. And I was like, oh, I have so much respect for people that work at labels that look at music outside of their stable. Like, one of the, and that happens with Nuclear Blast sometimes. And then one of the funniest moments I ever had doing reactions on YouTube, which still sounds funny to say out loud. I don't know why. Like, this was never supposed to be a thing, but I was talking to somebody that's like a higher up at Metal Blade one day, and he was like, bro, if you haven't, you need to check out Leprous. You need to do a reaction to them. And I was like, wait, they're not one of your bands, are they? He goes, no, but they're just fucking awesome. And I'm like, that's amazing that like you're pitching me a band that isn't even on your label. Like, that shows me that somebody actually legitimately loves the music more than the actual business behind it.
There's definitely still some of those people out there, and like you say, you mentioned Leo from Nuclear Blast.
Yeah.
Like, she's amazing. She's amazing. Like, she was, I think she was in the UK seeing might have been Cradle of Filth or something. Like, she was there for a Nuclear Blast meeting. She came like a day early so she could come watch one of our shows. And like, you know, we're a nobody band, but she was like, I'm going to come out. And she's been super helpful to us.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's definitely people out there who, you know, just want good music to be heard. And I mean, obviously you're one of them yourself, mate, because, you know, you do a lot to help people get, you know, some exposure and get a foot in the door. It definitely have helped us. And very appreciative of that.
It's a weird, well, thank you. And it's a weird thing navigating this YouTube thing because, you know, I've talked about it with so many people, so I won't go like, we won't talk about reactions a ton, but like, you know, coming from somebody who was in a band and then somebody who's worked for bands, it's like, if I could, I would do nothing but like unsigned bands and smaller bands and stuff like that, because, you know, there's something in discovering something that's relatively unknown, that when you find it,
feel like it's yours, yours,
and it's so good and you're just excited. Like, at the end of every month on my Twitch channel, at the last Saturday of every month, we do a reaction stream where people can give me their reactions, but it's specifically hidden gems. It has to have under a certain amount of views. It has to be, you know, whatever. Dude, we have discovered so many random bands that nobody's ever heard of that they're like, this is amazing. Like, how has nobody, like, bands that we had a band the other day that was so fucking good. And I pulled them up on Spotify and it's like 58 monthly listeners. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Heartbreaking. It's like, heartbreaking, isn't it? Like, the amount of talent out there. There's like, you know, some bands that we've played shows with, and, you know, the bands who like support you on shows, and like, you know, there's no reason that we should be supporting you. There's so many, like, yeah, the whole perspective of like who's where people are in the music industry and like the levels of success. Like, you know, it's hard work and luck. You know, it's not down to the fact of, you know, this band is better than that band, so they get more. You know, there's a certain degree of luck, and everyone's like journey through that is different. But there's so many bands out there who, like, are crushed. Like, a band called, I don't know if you checked this band out, a band called Asleep at the Helm.
I've heard the name.
Dude, they're from the UK. Like, we've played a couple of shows with them over the years. Like, they've changed being Asleep at the Helm fairly recently. They just dropped a new album maybe like a month before we did. Honestly, mate, their record shits all over ours. They're so sick. They're sick. Honestly, yeah, get that in your ears. Like, I'm
literally following them on Spotify right now as you're telling me this, just so I don't forget.
Yeah, mate. Honestly, just they're one of those bands though, but like you'll hear them and you'll understand, because there's so many talented people in that band that it's like sensory overload when you listen to it, because it's like, as soon as there's like 3 mint clean singers in that band, 3 screamers. Like, you know, as soon as one finishes, like the next thing happens, like, right, well, that bit was better than the last bit. All right, this bit's better. Then you're like, just give up. I remember they sent me the pre-production of it. I was just like, right, cool. I can't wait to not write an album now.
I mean, dude, there's bands like that like I considered myself a pretty good musician in my band. Not overly complicated. I took pride in the fact that I was like a very pocket player. It's like I knew what I needed to play, and that's what I did. But dude, I watch some other musicians, and when they play, I'm like, why did I ever try? Like, these guys are so good, it's stupid. Like,
mate, yeah.
But dude, it's just that's so many people, like, they love their bands and they try and say like, these guys are the best musicians in the world. And I always tell people, I'm like, no, they're not. And I'm not trying to disrespect what you're saying. I'm just saying, objectively, there's no way that this band are the best musicians in the world. The best musicians in the world are people that we will probably never, ever hear, because, like you mentioned, how big you get or whether you get signed or anything like that, there's a ton of luck in that. There's a ton of luck. There's a ton of who you know, being in the right place at the right time. Like, I grew up in the Chicago music scene my whole life, like until I moved to Nashville. And there were so many good bands there that never got signed, that never blew up past the local scene. But then other bands that, in my opinion, weren't as good in that scene did get signed and blew up. And it's like, it's crazy. It's, you know,
there's so many, like, you know, little details that go into it. Like, I don't know, I'm like fascinated by record labels and the music industry in terms of that sense. Like, I have a lot of respect for how they can make or break a band and like business decisions that happen behind it. But you know, there's a lot of that goes into it, but you know, there's a lot you can do without labels. I think the difference between a label now versus, you know, 10 years ago is like, there's no one walking in with a nice big check that's going to be like, all right, that's it. You've made it. I think it's still regarded by, you know, I suppose probably people who aren't kind of wrapped up within this kind of like bubble of the music industry as like, you know, I remember, you know, when we were a signed band, everyone's like, oh, you signed. Wow. You know, you've made it, you know, and you're like, no, we're not. Like, it makes, you know, little difference to us. But the difference that I think they can add now, they can add pedigree, they can add a value to the band. It's an endorsement, basically. It's the biggest endorsement you can possibly get, but it comes at a price. Like, it's always going to come at a price. And it's basically whether you're willing to take that price to elevate the status of the band. And I think, you know, there's definitely pros and cons of it, but you know, at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make a living playing guitar. So
yeah, and dude, there's one of my favorite bands, like documentaries that they've ever made, like a DVD, was back in like the early 2000s. Chimera had this DVD called the Dehumanizing Process, and it was a double DVD it was like a live show that they did, but it was like a 2.5 hour long documentary that they filmed everything from like right when their first record, in their words, failed, and then recording The Impossibility of Reason. And it's so raw and so honest, and the things they talk about on this documentary are stuff that like a lot of bands don't want to talk about or admit, because there is a certain sense of when you are in a band and you get signed and stuff, there almost needs to be this larger than life persona.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, like people need to think that you're a rock star. That's how the music industry works. Like, so their guitar player was like, dude, when we got signed, we thought that was it. We thought like that was what we were working for. He's like, we're like, dude, we're going to be rich. We're going to be able to buy houses. And then he goes, slowly we realized we're just young idiots, because all that money did from getting signed was basically front the first record we recorded. And that was it. Like, and I mean, these guys, they were in this documentary. I think they were probably in their late 20s, maybe 30 at the time, some of them. And like, their guitar player, Rob, is like, yeah, I still live in my mom and dad's house because we're on tour all the time and I can't afford to just pay for my own place and stuff like that. It's just, that is the reality for a lot of bands, unless you're fucking huge.
Dude, yeah. I mean, like, we all work full-time jobs. You know, we have the entire time, and you know, we're kind of getting to this situation now where the shows are coming in thick and fast, and trying to negotiate that time off with work is just like, you know, for the most part, everyone tries to be as helpful as possible, but we're not good people to employ, because at the drop of the hat, you're going to go, I'm off to go do this. Like, I'm sorry, you know, I understand it, I totally get it, but you know, when the argument is, do you want to play a show to 20,000 people, or would you like to sit on Microsoft Excel? Yeah. How about you take Excel? I'm going to go play a fucking show. Sick.
Yeah. I mean,
it's not even an option.
Yeah. Same, dude. When I was in a band, it was the same thing. We'd get home from touring for 2.5, 3 months, you know, and then we'd all go work. I luckily got a job at a music venue that was very cool about the schedule. That was like, yeah, whenever you're home, you can do the shows. And then when you're gone, obviously we'll get somebody else. I had another guy in my band that was like an assistant manager at like a Sherwin-Williams paint store. Like literally 9 to 5 was just mixing paint for people. And like,
Crazy.
that's what it is, dude. Like a lot of these bands, I mean, damn near everybody that I've talked to on this podcast so far is somebody that has a full-time job when they're not touring, because again, that is the misconception with a lot of bands, is they assume that if you're touring, or if you're an international band, or if you're signed, it's like you're loaded, you're good, you don't have any worries. And that's just not the case, unfortunately.
Not the truth.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, like this kind of like line of conversation ties in completely to what the record is about. Like the whole idea of Deadlock was like, you know, we just spent 2 years obviously writing an album, but just working normal jobs, not playing shows, not doing any of it. Like we got a taste of normality 100% of the time. And it's shit. Don't want that. Do you know what I mean? Like that's just not the life for me. I think, you know, we'd released 2 records. We're, you know, I say we're getting on. Like, I'm still fairly young. I'm 26. The rest of the guys are like 29, 30.
Okay.
But, you know, we need this to pan out. It needs to work, because, you know, we need to be, it's that we're at a breaking point of like, either it elevates to the next stage and it becomes something that's a bit more viable to be like, okay, yeah, I will quit my job for this, and I'll do whatever I can, you know, lay your life on the line. That's what you do for this. It's music has to be a passion. And that's kind of what the album's all about. It's us trying to figure out where we are, who we are without that kind of part of your identity, and figure out how we kind of take this from here to here. And I think that's kind of what's helped a lot. I think a lot of people who were in the music industry can kind of get that when they hear it.
Yeah.
And like, you know, it's definitely an album bit like, you know, for those kind of people. But I think at the same time, it kind of relates to a lot of other people, because everyone else is, you know, we're all just trying to figure out who the fuck we are. Yeah. And, you know, you got to do what makes you happy.
And that never stops.
Ultimately.
I mean, dude, I'm 34, and I'll tell you right now, when I was 26, I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I had life figured out. I thought I knew who I was, what I wanted. Dude, if I'm being honest, it wasn't until like the last few years where I really was confident in like who I am as a person and my life and stuff like that. And I guarantee you, 2 years from this conversation, I'll probably look back and feel differently as well. We constantly grow and change and evolve. And you know, one of the important things I think you mentioned is you said, you know, that's not the life that you wanted for yourself, you know, that normality. And I totally understand that. Some people are fine with that. They like that stability and security of the 9 to 5 job and just coming home and stuff like that. But there are other people like yourself, like me, that are just basically nomads, where it's like you want to write your art, you want to travel the world and play it for other people. And it's just not as easy to do as a lot of people think. Now, the recording process, I would imagine with technology nowadays, probably makes it easier to record an album now than, you know, 10, 15 years ago. But the touring aspect of it and the living off of that income is still very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like, I'm under no illusion that even if the band, you know, takes off, that is going to be my sole income. You know, like we have a fantastic manager. You know, I speak to him more than I speak to anybody in the world. Probably more than I speak to my missus, to be fair. And like, you know, we have a great working relationship where, you know, I kind of handle a lot of the day-to-day stuff, and I make sure nothing reaches him that isn't, you know, crucial. And like, you know, that kind of thing is something that I want to move into, you know, or just working within, you know, the music industry at labels or with management, because it's interesting. And those kind of jobs are the kind of the way I think you can sustain being in a band, because, you know, you can kind of like use kind of any experience you have to help other people. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that music, there's definitely other avenues that you can find ways to sustain yourself. But yeah, by all means, I don't anticipate anytime soon we're going to be, all right, lads, let's all quit our jobs and sail off into the sunset. It's going to be,
yeah,
let's quit our jobs and find a really nice pot that we can write tips on the front.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. Move to Nashville if you want to do that. That's what every band here does. Like,
see, from the UK, it's not something that's like normal in the UK.
Yeah.
But I think it's something we're gonna have to get involved with, because these things are getting we're getting busier and busier schedules, and things are just it's wild, and
Yeah.
you can only buy so many McDonald's when
Yeah,
you got no
for
job.
sure, dude. We used to, when we were in a band, I don't think they have them overseas. I think it's just an American thing, but there's this chain called Cece's Pizza, and it's an all-you-can-eat pizza buffet, and it's $5.
Oh
Dude,
yeah, let's
that
go.
was
Let's
a
go.
lifesaver for us when we were broke dudes in a band. I mean, there was one
Let's
down
go.
the street from where we lived, and every day it would be like, all right, I think I could spend like $10 today. Let's go have lunch at Cece's. And we'd sit there for like 3 hours and just smash pizza and just hang out. And like, it's
Just
those
say, like,
little things like,
in like band life, true kind of band fashion, how did you go about hustling that? Because I'm assuming like one guy bought the pizza and then it's like sliding slices across the table. You were all buying
no.
$5.
So it's, no, we each paid, because it's like,
Okay.
it's literally $5, and you get
Yeah.
a large drink with unlimited refills. You just go up to the thing and fill it. And
Yeah.
they constantly restock pizza. There's like 20
That's
different
insane.
kinds of pizza just laying out, and it constantly just gets restocked. So you can literally go up as many times as you want and just eat. So there were days that we sat
Man.
there for like 3 or 4 hours because we were just broke ass dudes in a band that weren't going to eat otherwise. So
Yeah, you don't know when the next meal's coming, do you?
seriously, dude, no joke. I can't tell you how many times we were on tour where it's like, you got to rely on, we did a lot of package tours with big bands, but the negotiation to get on that tour with a big band was that because we were unsigned and nobody who knew who we were, we didn't have a guarantee. So we had to rely on merch money. And just as well as I do, some nights are good, some nights can be terrible. And we never knew what kind of nights those were going to be. So we basically learned to live like broke ass dudes 100% of the time, because we never knew what kind of income that was going to generate at shows.
That's it. And like you say, touring, particularly when you're doing like support tours, naturally your guarantee if you get in one is lower, and you are kind of you go into a tour on a deficit. That's 100% how it happens. Like, you'll always have a minus before the number of the before you start the tour, but then you just have to use the merch to try and recoup that. And like, there's a lot to be said between like making profit on a tour and then like, considering, if you take a bit of a loss on a tour, but you've played to, a couple of hundred people every night, that's a marketing budget,
Yeah.
So would you spend that on marketing? Yeah, you would. So, obviously don't take everything that comes along if it's not going to be the right move for you financially and stuff, but there's definitely, you can make tactical moves with it. And I think, particularly when you get to new territories, you're always going to make losses. And it's hard because to be fair, we all get really into it. We love slinging merch. Like, it's probably the best part. Well, not the best part. I mean, the show's the best part, but being after the show, getting to the merch table, we all just hang out there, have a beer. But that's when you get to genuinely meet people and get real-time feedback. It's this like, that is the connection. Like, if you want more of a connection from a show than purely just playing that show, that's where you need to be.
Dude, don't ever lose that mindset, man. Because when I first started out as a roadie, I was a merchandise manager for years. Like, everything from like club tours to arenas and all that stuff. And I've worked for bands that do the same thing you do, where it's like, all right, show's done. We're going to go hang at the merch table, meet the fans. The fans appreciate that. They see that you're taking the time to meet them, to talk to them, to listen to their feedback. There's a lot of bands that get to a certain point where they just don't give a shit anymore. They're like, all right, we've reached a certain level. It doesn't matter. Like, we don't have to go interact.
The t-shirts will sell themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, we're at a certain level that we don't have to necessarily care about what, or the interaction with the fans is the point I'm trying to make. Like, man, that's the biggest thing, in my opinion, as somebody who used to do merchandise professionally, is like, that is a prime moment for any band to just take the time, even if it's one member, even if you guys want to trade out every night, and like, that's the prime time for you guys to just turn somebody who likes your band into a dedicated diehard fan.
That's it, mate. End of the day, like I grew up going to gigs. I still go to gigs now, and meeting those people and having a conversation with them is like, it's invaluable because you walk away with that moment and you go like, that's something someone might treasure. You know what I mean? That might be the moment that they go, all right, I want to start being in a band, or I want to, make an effort with other people. Like it's a small price to pay. I know you do the same thing as we do. So like I've seen you replying to comments and stuff on YouTube, and I think like I reply to if you go on all the singles like that we've released, I've replied to every single comment on those music videos.
Yeah,
and it's like that to me is a small price to pay in time.
yeah.
To be like, one, to connect with people, and two, like if someone's willing to take the time out of their day to comment on a video saying this is awesome, it's a two-way street, isn't it? You know what I mean? End of the day, like there's no music without the fan, and just having that conversation of just being like, I'm glad you like it.
Yeah.
You don't have to reply to it. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be anything amazing, but we read all those comments anyway. We're always there. We're always involved in it. So to let someone know, like, thank you for doing that. It's a small price to pay.
And I think in the last couple of years, it's no secret, and I'm just trying to leave myself as somebody that does reactions out of this. I think it's no secret to anybody that's in the music industry. We've seen over the last 2 years, like the reaction scene on YouTube exploded. A lot of bands are getting bigger than they were because of people sharing their music and stuff. But you see a lot of those bands go to these reaction channels and they comment on the stuff and they share the stuff on Instagram and stuff like that. And just from what I've seen, those bands that do that are definitely blowing up quicker than a lot of other bands, because the people are like, oh, wow, like this band actually took the time to come, like just recently. And this, I know there's more bands that have done this, but off the top of my head, like I did a reaction to Of Virtue. Dude, I
know the Odd Virtue guys. We toured with them when they were last in the UK.
Dude, that's awesome. I checked out their new single and I absolutely loved it. Those dudes went through every comment on my reaction video and talked to people and thanked people. And I'm like, that's a band that knows how to draw in those full-time fans, You
only have a select few moments. Like I always like, I explain this to people, like in a band, you get a few payoff moments. So you get when you release a song, when you play a show, I suppose, and then when you like interact with a fan, I guess in person. But you can interact with people online. You can get that moment at any point. I pull out my phone and I can do that in real time. There's always going to be someone who has made the effort to talk to us. Like those little payoff moments. We're as excited, it's like say you reacting to a song for the first time, and if you love a song, it's as exciting for us to see that as it is for you to hear it. Like I know, like I've watched some of your videos before. We obviously you've been discussing about reaction videos and like the back and forth between like issues with like labels and all sorts of stuff. But I think for the most part, like I know I'll speak for all of us. As soon as a reaction video goes up, we literally sit there searching the band name, refreshing most recent, and we watch every single one, and it gets sent to our group chat, it gets sent to our management. We all watch them, we all love them, and we'll always take the time to comment and say like, and when you're a creative, when you're sitting there in a room writing something, obviously you're writing it for yourself, but to see someone get the same kind of feeling that you get from something, you share a moment, and to do that, like kind of not like necessarily kind of in the same room, it's really cool. Particularly we were releasing an album through kind of like COVID times. It's essential. That was the closest thing, creatives could get to getting that rush that you get from a show. And yeah, I don't understand why there could ever be issues with it.
There's a lot of different things in my opinion. I don't know the answers because I'm not these labels, but I've seen the change. When I first started doing reactions, it was July of 2020. So a few months after the pandemic first was like full blown started. And the reaction scene started exploding because people were at home, people were watching YouTube, reactions became popular. So everybody started doing it. But when I first started doing them, I was getting blocks and copyright claims and shit left and right. And I personally think that the YouTube automated algorithm copyright claim service is a little broken, because look at somebody like Nick Nocturnal. He rewrites songs and covers them, doesn't even use any of the original audio, and he'll still get a video blocked for the original copyright on the song. And I'm like, it's not even the original song. At best, it's a cover, and they should split the monetization for the licensing, which is a thing that YouTube does. But within the last year, I've seen a lot of labels do a 180. I mean, a lot. Like,
oh yeah,
these labels and bands see it as marketing, and that right there is not my opinion. That's what I've been told by labels. They
100%, mate. 100% is something that we take into account. It's something that we're very aware of, and like, and this is it. Like, I suppose leading on from this is, these podcasts and all these kind of situations. Like, right now, this is the new form of music journalism, and I'm 100% here for it, because we're having a conversation, as peers, as opposed to a clickbait article, which is like, right, you've got 3 minutes, hit these points. To have a conversation with someone and actually, get to know someone, and like, you find out something about each other, and that is like a great thing. You are adding value to our band, and if in the meantime we can help add value to your life, I don't see any loss from that.
Yeah, and it is like you said, it's a trade-off, because like most music that I listen to, I try and find something about it that I enjoy. Like, if you go watch every single one of my reactions, there's maybe 5 times where I've said, I don't like this, but I like the mix, I like the production, I like the instrumentation. It's just not my thing. It's not something I'm going to listen to. And I try and be honest about that. And I have had people are like, you're always positive when you listen to music. I'm like, because that's the way to approach it, in my opinion. Like, I don't.
Who wants to go on your channel as well, and you just sat there going like, nah, that's shit. Yeah, I mean, like, there's enough negative stuff going on in the world
for sure. And there is a sense of like, everybody. A lot of people call out reactors now for just getting excited about everything, because they're not being honest, and they just think they don't want to piss off fan bases and stuff like that. And there is a sense of that for sure. There is definitely. I will tell you right now, I'm always honest when I do my stuff. I've said many times in reactions, again, like, I don't know, this isn't really my thing, but whatever. But
respect that.
There are a lot of reactors that I know for sure. They're afraid of stepping on fan bases. I mean, recently when I did that video speaking about how Nightwish handles their blocks and strikes and claims, and I made a point to say, organizationally, it might not even be from somebody in the band. It might be management. It might be like, I don't know. But I made a video just talking about it, and I was like, this is like, in my opinion, this is ridiculous, because they're posting about how they're the most reacted to band on YouTube, which is very true. A lot of people do Nightwish reactions because it pulls in views, but like, don't take pride in that when you've actively had your publisher uphold blocks and strikes on every reaction that gets hit with them. You know what I mean? But dude, that was the first time ever I encountered the full force from a fan base that was pissed. Like, dude, it was.
How did you find like better spare the pun? How did you find reacting to how they reacted? Like, because I know, like, when you get that first blast of negative, in like the whole sum, it can be a bit debilitating. Like,
it was.
It bugs you out, and it's like, we've got it, and you try not to let it get to you as much as like, whatever. You kind of like, how do you approach this? Because going back into it, you're kind of thinking like, it taints your idea of doing something in a room for you. That then becomes, you start to have that like, oh, but is this a thing? But yeah, how was that for you?
I won't lie, dude. It was a little depressing is too strong of a word, but we're getting into that territory, because it was like, on one hand, I don't care what somebody on the internet says, especially when it's clear they didn't watch the video. They just saw that I was saying something negative about the band that they liked and then just went in at me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my wife noticed. Like that night after that video was posted, it put me in a mental funk. And my wife was like, you seem out of it. And I'm just like, I mean, I'm having people on the internet tell me to kill myself right now because I said something about the band that they like, you know what I mean? And as much as, like I said, I don't care, it's the internet, whatever, it does get to you. And I find it fascinating that I won't speak for everybody, but I think a lot of people can relate. But for me, I see so much positivity on my channel and in my community on YouTube. And when I get those negatives, for some reason, the negatives are so much stronger than those positives. And that's what I latch onto for whatever reason. The positives outweigh the negatives 100-1. But when I get that one shitty comment from somebody, I just sit here and go, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean?
I tell you, it just weighs heavier, doesn't it? It's a strange thing. Like, you know, I try not to let it like get to you, but I think, right. So what you're doing, you know, in any kind of capacity is you're expressing yourself and you're putting yourself on the line. You know, it's the same with music. It's the same with any kind of outlet where you're creating some kind of content. And then as soon as like that negative reaction comes to it, like, you know, that it can really like get in the way of your flow. You know, you got to wake up on a morning and go, right, I'm going to go do this. But then that is that little nagging thing. You're like, oh, man. But yeah, it don't mean shit. And I think, you know, a lot of those people, they say they're not even paying attention. And I mean, I guess everyone's entitled to their opinion, but personally, if you know, I've never in my life sat there and gone, you know what, I'm going to go ruin someone's day and just like, fuck you. Yeah. Like, it's like, I don't know where some people get off. Like, fair enough, if they think they're defending their opinion, but whatever, man.
Well, it's like what Mike Tyson said recently. He's like, the internet has made people so comfortable to feel like they can say whatever they want without getting punched in the face for it. Like, you know what I mean?
Love that.
Because a lot of us reactors talk. I actually recently went out of my way. I started a Discord server and I invited like every other YouTuber that does music related stuff just to like, sick. Yo, let's get to know each other. We're all doing the same kind of stuff. Not a lot of people do this or get how this works. So this is a place that we can all talk and vent to each other and stuff like that. And it's funny to hear some of the stories from other people because of, you know, I could sit on a video or a live stream and somebody can be like, hey, do you like, I don't know, insert any band's name, whatever. Do you like this band? Or who do you like more, this band or this band? And I'll say the first band, and they're like, oh, so you hate the other band? I'm like, I didn't say that.
Looking for problems, man.
Yeah.
Just literally gunning for it. Like it's a loaded question, in it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Some people, like, you know, some people just want to watch the world burn. They're literally just, it's honestly, man, like, if that's what you want to do with your days, then sick. I'm going to make some music and have a fucking good time. Whatever, man.
And we all agree, like, we've talked about this so much on this Discord server. It's like, do you think if any of these people that are saying this shitty stuff saw us in public, they would say it to us? And everybody's like, no, of course they wouldn't. Like,
they'd see it in public and they'd probably ask for a photo. Literally, they'd be like, "Oh, you're Tank, yeah, let's get this picture." Yeah. Dude, yeah, it's crazy.
Mean, yeah, it's wild, man. But you know, it is what it is. It's like when I started doing YouTube and Twitch, it's like I know how ruthless the internet can be. I know very well that I was going to put myself out there for people to say whatever dumb shit thing they want to, and and whatever, you know, I try and let it roll off the best I can, and that's what it is. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing, man.
It's all good fun, isn't it? Like, it's all part of the job, unfortunately, isn't it? Like, no matter, you know, kind of what you do, it's just like, you know, to be fair, we're quite good with getting a lot mostly positive feedback, but I think that's just a sign of like the band yet needing to get a little bit more exposure, because it's like the wider your audience is. At the moment, either we're just doing a great job marketing to the people that will like our music, or we're just not hitting that super broad audience. So, you know, we don't get too many of the you know,
or the community
slaughter.
Yeah, or the community that's built up around your fan base is just mature and handles himself well. Because for the most part, like I said, the community on my YouTube channel is great. Like, I don't really get a lot of those kind of comments, but when I do, it's just like, dude, my favorite is when people hate something so much that they go out of their way to attack it. I have a guy that is on my, I don't know him. He's never been on my Discord, but there's a guy that every video I post, almost every video I post, he comments and just talks shit about Sabaton. Even if it's not a Sabaton video. I was like, so you hate this band so much for whatever reason that like you feel the urge to just comment everywhere how shit they are. Like
he's like, he thinks you're like an ambassador for Sabaton, that he must like also let you know.
And the other thing that people don't understand is how much privileged information we have that we respectfully don't say out loud. So going back to that Nightwish video, nothing I said in that video was really opinion. A lot of the stuff I said in that video was stuff that I have been told by people with connections to them in the industry, people that know things, but they were private conversations. I'm not outing people, like, and that's the other thing is with reaction videos. It's like a lot of people that hate reactors are like, you're stealing this band's music and you're trying to get popular off of it. I was like, this band asked me to do this reaction. Like, they don't know that, a lot of people don't know that bands and labels are talking to reactors now and asking them if they have the time to do reactions to new stuff. So.
That's it. I mean, and it's a human element, I think people can watch reactions and they get to also kind of gauge another person's opinion of it in real time whilst they experience it. So it's a good platform, and no matter what anyone says, like, for the most part, particularly for bands like us, it does wonders and it really helps us kind of grow. So we're massively appreciative of that.
For sure,
and don't let the bitterness
no
bitterness of people
I still enjoy it. If the day it stops becoming fun and it's just miserable at all times, I'm just going to shut my channel down and go do something else. I'm still having fun. But, one of the things I meant to bring this up earlier because you brought it up, but we were just having a good conversation. So a few weeks from now, you guys are kicking off tour dates. And I was looking at some of the shows that you guys have coming up, man. You've got to run with like Aviana and then Spiritbox, and some of those shows have Ice 9 Kills on it. Are you fucking stoked or what?
Yeah, mate. I will not believe they're happening until I'm stood there. Like, yeah. So obviously, we had the is it Aviana or Aviana? I'm not sure 100% how to pronounce.
I'm not sure which one is the correct one. I just say Aviana.
I think it's Aviana, but don't quote me on that. I'll ask him and I'll get back to you. But
well, if it's Swedish, it probably is pronounced Aviana.
Yeah, so, but I mean, we've been listening to all their releases as they've come out as well.
Yeah.
Fucking unbelievable. Like being a fan of them for a while, because I know they do some. I know previously they've had some tracks mixed by Jeff Dunn, I can't remember what his name is, but he works with he's done like a lot of like reamping stuff on some great albums. So that kind of like was how I kind of got an access point to them. But yeah, those shows are gonna be mental. We already had those kind of locked in, and then these Spiritbox dates like got announced, and we were just like on a whim, just kind of like messaged a manager who's friends with their manager and was like, we're literally finishing a tour the day before, whack us on those dates type situation. Because it's difficult because they're doing a lot of shows around like festivals and various different club shows. Same with Ice 9 Kills. So unless a band's willing to wait around in Europe, which we're 100% willing to do, it's not like because there's quite a few days off as well in between stuff. But yeah, it's fucking crazy. It's not something we ever anticipated, and like two of like the hypest bands.
It's gonna be so good for you guys, dude. Like,
and also gonna get to watch Spiritbox 7 times in the space of like 2 weeks. Literally, I'm gonna have the best summer ever.
Yeah, I was looking at those dates and I'm just like, it's so cool to see, especially just as well as I do, like the hype around Spiritbox right now, and then also Ice 9 Kills, who released. I mean, both bands released incredible albums recently as well. So,
yeah, dude.
I mean, it's and then
it's nuts.
And then after that, you've got a few summer festivals. It looked like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when this podcast's coming out, so I don't know when I can actually like say.
I mean, God, given my schedule right now, this will probably be out early June, but just to be safe, I was going to say, just be safe right. If you... Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so like we managed to get a fucking slot on main stage at Hellfest.
No France, way.
Which is, dude, that is main stage Hellfest. The capacity of that festival is 60,000 people and it's sold out.
Yeah, that's gonna be insane.
Sick. Literally, mate. Like, so, yeah, you know, I said to you earlier on about phones just buzzing off, and we're like looking at our phone, like, you're having us on. You know, it's just a laugh. Like, in that situation, you know, we're having to buy gear upgrades because we're not actually prepped for that kind of show. Like, it's ridiculous, mate. But yeah, so we'll be at Hellfest. The next day we'll be at Grasspop as well in Belgium. So yeah, it's turning out to be the polar opposite of a shit summer.
Yeah, like
the technical term.
It's crazy because there's actually a lot of people on my Discord community that when they hear that are going to be stoked, because I already know a ton of people that are going to both of those that have tickets. Man. So that's going to be cool.
Come see your boys shit themselves live on stage.
Dude, you know, it's funny how you talk about getting that news, that information on your phones. A few days ago, I did an episode that's not out yet with Chris Harms from Lord of the Lost, and they're going out to tour with Iron Maiden. And I was like, how did you take that news? And he goes, dude, I'm not kidding you. He's like, our booking agent called me and was like, hey, are you sitting down right now? Because if you're not, sit down. And he's like, yeah, Iron Maiden wants to take you guys on tour. And he's like, I couldn't imagine getting a phone call. Like, I mean, not even just Iron Maiden. I'm just talking even what you're saying. Like, it's all about frame of reference too. Because if I were in a band and I found out we were doing shows with like Spiritbox, Ice Nine Kills, Aviana, stuff like that, I'd be fucking stoked, you know?
It's literally the same thing. I get a phone call from a manager, and when he rings me, it means, yo, like, you get that call. And it's just been, it's meant because obviously we worked so hard on the record, like, and a lot of the time, you know, if you're not catching these things on the way of the record being released, you might have missed them. Mm-hmm. But like for us to like catch them after the fact and starting to be like, you know, we've noticed a significant change in like, you know, attitudes towards our band already since announcing those dates. It feels like all of a sudden, because Spiritbox and Ice Nine Kills are saying, yeah, we'll give these guys a chance. Like, you know, our band was approved for those shows by the band. You know what I mean? Like, it was literally sent to the band and they went, yeah, cool. Which is, you know, for us as people who listen to their music, it's amazing. Like, we're like, holy shit, the fact that because they're kind of like, you know, taking a chance on us and being like, yeah, we kind of want them on these shows. I feel like all of a sudden other people are starting to look and be like, oh, okay, so, they're there now, so maybe we should give them a chance as well, which is super exciting.
That's a great feeling, man, because a lot of these bands are very involved with those decisions. I don't know if people are really aware of that. I mean, obviously a booking agent is the one that's going to set up stuff, but these bands are very heavily involved. And a similar thing actually happened to me when I was in my band. We once randomly, we got added as a local opener for A Day to Remember when they played around the Chicago area. And this was like 2006. So
full-time show that then.
Oh, dude, wow. It was like right when For Those Who Have Heart came out.
Oh, no way.
It was like first record on Victory. It was amazing. Like clubs and stuff like that. But we hit it off with those guys so good that about a year later, we were on tour and we noticed that we were basically following their tour. And there were some shows that we were trying to fill in. And I hit up their guitar player, Tom, at the time. Tom was still in the band.
Yeah, I am.
And I was like, hey, man, we have a string of dates that we're trying to fill in. And we just noticed that we're like in the same cities you guys are. Is there any way we could just play? And he's like, yeah, like let me check with our agent. I'll see if I can make it happen. And a lot of the times, that answer can be like, I'm going to check with somebody else. So if I have to say no, somebody else said it. But their booking agent hit us up like an hour later and was like, yo, so if you want to get on like these 10 shows or whatever, it was a package with like A Day to Remember, Mayday Parade, Just Surrender. And then we got added as an additional band on like 10 dates, all because their guitar player just remembered our band and liked us and was like, yeah, sure, let's go. Like, that was one of those few moments for me where I was like, wow, like we got added on here because the band wanted us on here. Like, that's fucking
Yeah,
cool.
that's it. And like that, that relates to the conversation of like, how you kind of like carry yourselves in those environments, how you're like
Mm-hmm.
turning up to a show, whether you're doing a great job, you're making it easy for the headline bands, you're just being a nice person. Like, you probably had a good interaction with them
Mm-hmm.
before and they were like, yeah, sweet, we want to help you out. And like, I think there's a lot to be said for just being, a good dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, that was a very similar situation for us. Like originally we got, I think we got some of these Spiritbox shows and we were like, we were like amazing, over the moon. And we went back and we were like, can we have the ones with Ice Nine Kills as well? And they're like, let me check with Ice Nine Kills. And they were like, yeah. And then we found that Ice Nine Kills had another show. So we were like, oh, guys, can we jump on this one as well? They're like, yep.
Is that the one
So,
in? Is that the one in Belgium?
yeah, in Antwerp, yeah.
Yeah,
Just got upgraded as well, which
I
is,
saw that.
yeah, mad, mate.
Awesome,
Honestly.
man. And then,
Yeah.
so I know you guys had is it Leeds and London? You guys did record release shows last month.
Yeah.
Was that the
sick.
first time you had played in a while, or have you done any shows over the pandemic?
We did. We actually did. To be fair, it's fairly close to, because that was like April. We did those release shows, but we did a full UK tour in December.
Oh, okay.
Which was super interesting because like COVID in the UK in December was absolutely rife. Like,
yeah, same here.
It was. I mean, we were like expecting the tour to get cancelled. Like everything's going to get shut down, but the tour happened. We managed to complete the tour. I think the day after we got back, our driver got COVID, which was, which sucks. Like we had a band called Ghost Iris supporting us.
Oh yeah.
They'd driven all the way from Denmark and they got COVID on day 3.
Oh.
And Denmark is like a 24-hour drive. You know what I mean? Like probably plus, So felt super bad for those dudes because they were crushing it. They were doing a great job. The shows were mint. And like, I feel like they got COVID and then we started to notice that like there was just more drop-offs from compared to like even like ticket sales and stuff because people were just, isolated and obviously getting COVID and a lot of people like, very scared, rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we managed to finish the tour. It was mint. It was nice to do like, a full kind of run again and kind of earn our stripes. We bought loads of new gear and stuff over COVID as well. So like we switched to in-ears and all that kind of, so it was a nice bit of like teething process for us to figure out what we're doing. But yeah, I think we're definitely due a full UK run probably later on this year for the new record and kind of play some more of the new tracks from there.
Nice.
But yeah, it's definitely all exciting, definitely really fun. And like the great thing is like, I'm sure you'll have had this in like, your bands as well. Like when you write a new record, we're always trying to make it hard. Like it should be really hard to play because you should be growing as a musician. Like, so naturally, like every time we write something, it's always like, we want it to be a step up. We want it to be challenging to play. But all these new songs are fucking well hard to play, which is awesome. Like, I mean, it's great because it's changed the way like we approach shows. We're like a lot more like kind of serious in terms of like the warming up stuff now because there's no option. Like it has to be done. But it's just exciting for us now because now we're in a great situation where I think with maybe like our previous record, by the time it was out, we were like, oh, we're going to play like 1 or 2, 3 songs off this. Whereas now we're kind of like, we want to play this record. Yeah. We want to literally like, we want as much as this record in this set as possible. So we're just having a great time, like getting to actually play some of these new songs and really excited to try and get more of like, the new record and maybe even some like full record shows kind of like down the line, which would be
That'd
cool.
Be awesome. I'm always so impressed, man, when I see like, because when I was in a band, I look back at it now and I feel the stuff I was playing was pretty simple for the most part. Like the band I was in was like kind of in the vein of like Story of the Year, kind of like screamo type of stuff. Yeah. So we moved around a ton on stage, but for the most part, at least for me, I know my guitar players had some more complicated parts, but for me, I could go full bore an entire set, 100%, run around like a fucking idiot and do backflips off my amp and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's music that I hear nowadays, especially with a lot of the metal bands that are putting stuff out where I'm like, dude, how do you like sustain an hour-long set like playing all of this and remembering how to play all of this? And
I just feel bad for Josh, our drummer, because he gets the worst time. Honestly, mate, I mean, obviously, we're only having to move our hands, and Ben. To be fair, Ben with his pitch pushed kind of vocals as well, it's so like intense on your voice. But yeah, we're all learning and growing, and I think that's the biggest thing for us, because I think the moment you release an album, whether it's like it doesn't necessarily have to be technically harder, but if you're not growing, if you're not moving forward, if you're not like writing ultimately better songs, then you're not kind of elevating. And that was like the thing for us, where we kind of noticed, we're like, okay, so these songs are significantly better than what we've done before. They're significantly harder, but we're a very hungry band. So we still practice. Like we're all fairly local, live local. The band is our best mates, so for us to practice, it's just a great excuse to see your mates. We practice like twice a week, and we're constantly chasing some kind of like periphery level of perfection, but not achieving it.
Dude, you know who blew my fucking mind recently? Two bands, actually. I went and saw my first show in a while a couple months ago. I went and saw Ginger at a club in Nashville, and I was honestly blown away by how impressively tight they were all around. I was like, and from my background in touring and music and stuff, I hear everything. I know what I'm listening for when I'm listening for tracks. Or
I know you can say I do the same, mate. If it's too good, I'm like, okay, so what where we pulling the tracks? Like, dude, what we doing?
It was minimal. Like I was watching, I was going back and forth through everybody, just watching. Like I was watching Eugene for a while, just shredding the bass, and I'm like, all right, that's 100% him. And then I'd look at Roman and be like, that's 100% him. And then I'd like watch Tatiana for a while, and I'm like, there's no tracks in here. Like it's ridiculous. And then I didn't go to the show because our daughter was still like 6 months old, and we were worried about COVID and stuff. Lorna Shore played in Nashville at 110 capacity bar. What? 110 people.
When was this?
They
won't be playing that now, will they? Holy shit.
Oh, dude, this was like shortly after, this was a couple months after like To the Hellfire first came out. Like,
really?
Yeah. And it was, the crazy thing is though, the night before they played at 1,000 capacity club in Atlanta, and then they got here and they're in this tiny dive bar. And I'm sure that's how booking works that far out. Like they hadn't blown up how they did now, but I went to their sound check because I wasn't going to be able to make the show. Yeah. And I just, it's one of those dive bar venues where nobody's checking credentials. Like their drummer invited me down and I just walked in. I didn't even have to talk to anybody. Like I just fucking walked through the front door. And right when I walked in, they were just starting their sound check. And I just sat in the back of the room at the front of house console. And first of all, whoever they had on tour with them that was mixing them was incredible, especially in that tiny of a room. But they blew me away, dude. I watched their whole sound check and I was just like, again, one of those, I was like, how do you remember how to do all this? And then I got really fixated on Austin, their drummer, because the dude's just a machine.
He's insane, yeah.
And I'm watching him play, and it's like almost no effort. He's flying through these kick patterns and these blast beats and these fills, and he's just like, it almost looks like he's bored. He's just like, and then
he's definitely one of those mutants, and he just absolute.
And then when they finished their sound check, this was the craziest part. He looked like he was like kind of in some pain, and he saw me and he came up, and it was funny. That was the first time I'd ever met those guys in person. And even like Will, who I have never interacted with ever, like knew who I was from YouTube, and it was a really weird feeling. He's like, "Oh, Tank, what's up, bro?" And I'm just like, "Oh, this is weird."
Sick.
But I helped Austin move all of his drums off stage for the other bands, because I was just there, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll help you out." And I was like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh, I've got." He's like, "I've had a ruptured disc in my back for like 2 months." I was like, "Wait, you have a ruptured disc in your back, and you just did all of that? What the fuck, dude?" Like.
Not human.
Did that whole tour with a ruptured disc. Like,
I think it's insane, isn't it? But you'll know how it is. That I'm pretty sure I've seen you say on one of your videos that you've done tours with broken legs and broken limbs. Like, you got to do a tour. You got to do a tour. Like, it don't matter. You'll make that work. You will suffer through it. Yeah. And it's
well, brutal. As a band member, if you get injured, it's like nobody wants to cancel shows. And then as a roadie, if you get injured, you don't want to go home because no matter how good you are at your job, there is no such thing as security in the music industry in terms of working for bands, because I could have went home and they could have brought somebody else out that maybe didn't do as good of a job as me, but they could have liked him more and been like, hey, we want to keep this guy full time. So my third show ever with the country artist that I just worked for like 6 years, I broke my foot on stage. It was, I was walking out to hand him a guitar. It was the last song of the set.
Yeah.
When I was walking back off stage, I rolled my ankle on a cable ramp so hard that it broke my foot.
Shit.
Like,
holy shit.
And the crazy thing was, you'll know how this works, we had a show the next day. So I couldn't do anything about it. I woke up in the morning, I looked at my foot, it was swollen and black, and I was like, fuck it, time to work. And then we finally had a day off and they put me in a boot, and that roadie mentality is just like, I don't want anybody else to get the chance to take my job, so I'm going to work in a boot for 6 months.
There's a lot to be said about like band and crew, like loyalty and like, you know, dedication to like that. You know, we had a similar thing. Our photographer, Chris, like he's been part of this band since the band started. Like he's grown and learned, and now he's like getting loads of work from loads of other bands purely because like he wasn't even a photographer when like the band first started, but he's now like, you know, just crushing it. Same thing. You've got his foot absolutely taken out. We're to take him to A&E, and he was in a moon boot, but he did the rest of the tour. Like that's it. You know, you're not gonna miss it. You know,
no.
It's the things you do. It's like military, and it's like some kind of like military dedication.
It's almost being. I always joke, and like nobody takes this seriously, but I always joke that like being a roadie is almost like a warrior mindset. It's like, as much as you guys love going on stage and playing, I legitimately equally love what I do. I love being the person behind the scenes that is setting up all day to be able to provide for these bands to go put on that show. Does that make sense? Like
It's
fucking
a shared
love
experience, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's it. Like at the end of the day, without the crew making sure that everything's working. Like, I mean, we at the moment we don't travel with anyone kind of doing any kind of crew work for us. We have people who help, with like kind of like pat down and stuff, who are like crew members in other senses, like driver and photographer and stuff. But there's so much work in going into making sure that the gear works. You know what I mean? Like, there's a constant pursuit in trying to find things that are reliable, and having someone dedicated to making sure that okay, that peace of mind. Like, I would love to be able to just walk on stage and be 100% with the music and not worrying about the cue's going to go off, is this going to do this? You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot to be said for it.
And that's what I always tell people too. Like, there was a pretty popular quote that was going around from Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull recently, where he said that any musician that has a tech or a roadie is a diva, because he was like, really, you need somebody to change your own strings and to set up your amps for you? Like, that's fucking like diva attitude. And I was like, nah, I highly disagree with that, because when you get to a certain level, like we've already talked about, there's so much more going on during the day for these bands, man. Again, meet and greets, phoners for radio appearances, tons of other stuff that the roadies are there to make sure that all they have to worry about that day is walking on stage and putting on a good show. So
it's a massive trade-off, and like, the ability to, also the ability for a band. I mean, it's not something that's happened to us yet, but for ability for a band to facilitate someone's livelihood by having them on that, tour, that's a great thing as well. You're getting to share that experience with more people, and everyone's getting to be, a part of this bigger thing. And I'm all down for, trying to make sure that everyone in like our crew and everyone's also kind of having this. It's not just work, but it's a memory that they're gonna walk away from it going like, that was sick. That was awesome. Yeah,
and it's funny because there is a certain similarity between the grind that a lot of crew guys go through with in comparison to the bands as well. So at the level that I was at as a roadie before the pandemic happened, I'm very proud of where I got to. Like, it paid our bills, it allowed us to do a lot of cool things. And people look at that and they're like, oh shit, you've toured with, you know, these people and blah, blah, blah and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, but what you're not seeing are the years of really small, shitty tours I did where I was the only person employed by that band who worked on 3 different guitar players' gear and the drums, and then sold merch. And like, so there's almost a similar hustle when you're a young band and when you're first getting into the industry as a crew member for younger bands as well. I mean, dude, it took me, I've been a roadie since 2008, somewhere around there. And it took me until like 2016 to get to a point where I was actually financially making enough where like I didn't have any worries in terms of like, can I pay my bills this month? You know what I mean? So it's like, it wasn't like I was making a ton of money. Like I did a tour with, I did a tour with Van Halen in 2012 doing merchandise. Wow. And that was one of the years where I made the least amount of, I made less money then than I made with bands more recently.
Really?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Just because of the situations and the, you know, stuff like that. So, you know, there is a certain level of experience that you have to build as a roadie before you do get to that like pay level where it's like comfortable and stuff like that. So, you know, I always, whenever people ask me how to become a roadie and they're like, hey, I want to work for bands, I was like, well, I'm going to give it to you real, dude. Like your first few tours, you may be the only crew. My first tour, I made $50 a day. And like, at the time, that sounds, right now, that doesn't sound like a lot. But at the time, as like a 20-year-old kid that wasn't making anything when he was in a band, dude, it was like somebody, $50 a day.
Paid to be there.
Dude, $50 a day at the time made me feel like I was fucking rich. Like, I was so stoked.
It's crazy. Like I said that, like, you know, because all the people who kind of work with us and stuff are like, a lot of the time they're like friends that, like, you know, have maybe not necessarily originally doing that kind of job, but have come into the fold because they've got some kind of experience or like they want to be involved. And, you know, because you know how it is, touring dynamics, particularly when you're, you know, we're a traveling party in the moment of about 7 people, and we're in a long wheelbase Mercedes Sprinter, which is a 9-seater, and 7 people will sleep in that van. You know what I mean? Like, it's, you know, and, you know, people say, oh, you know, like you said, oh, you go on tour, it must be amazing. And I was like, the reality is, it's absolute ball soup in that van. There's 7 people sleeping in this van in 30-degree heat, you know, and if it was any other job, you'd be trying to get to a union, or you'd be complaining that your human rights weren't being met. You know what I mean? But that is where you have to love it. You have to want it more than anything. And, you know, there's a lot to be said for, if some people have it in them, some people don't. And I think if you do have it, you'll ride it until you've got to get off that train. But a lot of the time, it's normally too late.
And you can see it immediately in people. Like, I've been on tours where, as like a seasoned backline tech or something, it's like, hey, we're gonna bring this younger kid out that wanted to tour. Like, we're gonna give him a shot. After like 2 days, you can be like, he doesn't have it. Like, and what I mean by that is, like, people are built for the road or they're not. And that's massively. you can tell very fast with somebody on a tour that wanted to become a roadie or not, if they have that like nomad sense of skill to them, or if they don't.
There's a lot more that kind of goes on in the sense of, there's highs and there's lows. Obviously there's difficulties being, you know, away from, you know, normal life and loved ones, and like, it's part of the sacrifice, I guess, for any kind of musical venture is, you know, there's a song on the record which is about, it's called Half-Life. It's like, you live 2 lives. You have to put everything on hold to go do stuff, and you miss so much shit. Like, you miss a lot of, you know, big moments for everyone else. And like, I think sometimes people, it's difficult because people who are like, oh, you know, you missed this, whatever, they forget that it also sucks for you. But it's like, you know, I guess you've made the decision to pursue this. But when you're pursuing a musical venture, like, for me personally, it doesn't feel like a choice. I don't feel like I have a choice. I have to do it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the, you know, the kind of like the duality of the dual lives that you kind of end up experiencing.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. The missing things in your life, like I can't tell you. I mean, that's kind of why I like semi-retired. When I found out that my wife was pregnant, I was like, this is literally the one thing I will not miss. Everything else, I at this point I'm fine with. Like, dude, my wife and I have been married for 8 years this year, and we have still not taken a honeymoon.
No way.
I got home from a tour 3 days before we got married and left 2 days
Wow.
later. Like,
Holy
those are
shit.
the things. I've missed funerals, weddings, you name it. I've missed it all. But yeah, it sucks. It like, on one hand, it looks like we as the people that are touring, it's shitty on us because we're missing that stuff. But it also sucks for us. It's like, yeah, I would have loved to have gone and done this with, my wife or whatever. And it's like, a lot of people don't think about the artists either. Like the dude that I just worked for the last 6 years, this country dude, like missed his, when he was young on the grind, like missed his grandfather's funeral, who he's very close with, because it's like,
You get the
there's,
opportunity, sometimes it's
there's
not
this,
going to happen again.
the sacrifices that you have to make to stay on the road, man. I mean, Chad Kroeger has a very famous quote where he said one of the hardest things to ever have to do, and I think he was talking about like his first wife or something, said the hardest thing that you'll ever have to do is tell the person that you love most in the world that your music career comes before they do. And
Yeah, and I
it's,
tell you what, like props to all the partners and stuff who support people in bands, and I'm very very lucky that I've got like a super supportive missus who gets it, and it's not an easy task because
mm-mm.
it's like you say, it can feel like there's a third person in that relationship, which is the band, and it's not easy for them to be like willing to take 50% of what they deserve, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept, and like you say, I think that's a very similar thing to what we're on about. Some people have that ability to live the life on the road and don't. I think it's the same. Like some partners are able to, make the best of that, and some aren't. And thank God that they are some that are.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'd be very lonely.
I mean, dude, I had so many relationships before I met my wife where, you know what it was? You know what it was about my wife when I told my parents I was going to propose to her, my dad's like, "What what is it about her?" And I'm like, "She's the first person I've ever been with that's never tried to get me to stop touring and stay home. Every other girlfriend I've had at some point was like, you ever think about not touring as much?" And like,
It gets
it's
past that
just,
like short period of time, and it's like, so what are we gonna do about this touring thing? And you're
yeah,
like, well,
yeah. It's like
that's
this.
part of the package, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and the sad thing is, in my personal situation, is it's all I know. I didn't
Mm,
finish schooling. I didn't do a trade or anything like that. I've been touring
mm.
since I was 18 years old. If that went away, I have fucking no idea what I'd be doing. Now, I guess I have my answer. During the pandemic and we couldn't tour, I started YouTube, but like
Mm.
that was the thing, is like, if I ever just wanted to stop touring, just at all, say the pandemic didn't happen, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have
I
no
feel
idea.
that, mate. The
Like,
only thing I'm good at is music. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like that's everything I've ever done in my life has been catered towards, being in a band or being involved in music somehow. So I don't, there's
Yeah.
no plan B. There's no like, there's no kind of second chance, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess for people like us that are used to that, the positive is we're so used to just making things work in any situation, because the situations we get thrown into in the road and stuff. So I'm sure there'd be something. I'm sure there'd be something I'd fall into, but I don't know what it would be. I have no idea.
It gives you a good mentality, I think, with the music industry because you're used to getting served shit sandwiches a lot of the time. That
Yeah.
you learn to make a light of kind of bad situations, and you also get really good at fixing problems. That's ultimately kind of what you do, and I think that whether we kind of notice or not, it does transfer a lot into life. There'll be things like there'll be times where you'll be asked to kind of do a very normal task, but you'll do it probably more efficiently than someone else will because you're so used to having a million and one issues because it's a high intensity and like high stress. Any kind of like performing, any kind of, even just like theatre shows or anything, any kind of thing that's like a live production, there's a lot on the line for, one dropped ball. So there's a lot to be said for being able to make that consecutively work,
Yeah,
multiple
for
nights
sure.
in a row.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many like roadie skills or I think it was Grant from Unleash the Archer calls them hobo skills. He's like
Love it.
when you tour, he goes, there's a certain set of hobo skills that you learn and you never forget, and it translates to home, man. Some of the things I do at home when I try and fix things are the same way I would do it on the road. Like
You're
I
just
can't.
walking around with duct tape, just duct tape
Oh,
in
dude,
absolutely.
I literally probably have one arm's reach. I have so much gaffer's tape at my house for like, if something breaks, it's like, yeah, whatever, let's
And
fix
like
it.
fluorescent cloth tape, you'll see some like, mate, I get so much joy from labeling stuff with like
Yeah, same.
fluorescent tape. It's untold. Like my missus always takes the piss out of me for it. So what you doing? I'm like, I'm just labeling some stuff. Like, honestly, it's the greatest.
Yeah. I mean, those are the little meticulous things, man. I mean, one of the things I love but also hate about working on gear and stuff like that is like there's some of the processes that I hate so much. Like, for example, soldering. Dude, when we got our new rigs, like we switched early before the pandemic, we switched from our like tube amps that we were using or the guitar players that I worked for to fractals. We got Axe FX3s. And I was like
Yeah.
really against it because all I knew was tube amps, and there was a part of me that was like, oh, I'm gonna have to learn something new and I'm kind of scared about it. But switching to digital was amazing. But building those rigs, me and our other guitar tech literally, I can't tell you how many cables we soldered for the patch bays and then the rigs and stuff like that. And I hated the process. But then when it's done, we can just stand back and be like, oh, it looks so good.
It's mate, it is so good.
Yeah.
We have two racks that I built. One's called one's Tyrone and one's Rack Miller. But honestly, yeah, like I love building racks, mate. I get sucked into it so badly. I'm like, oh, but if we just get this, like I've just programmed all the MIDI changes because like same thing. We were using Laney Ironhearts for the longest time. We still use Laney cabs that were actually like endorsed by Laney, so like we still use all the Ironheart cabs, and but we switched to Line 6 Helixes for the digital E's and switching to in-ears, and basically as well, the lighter weight and also tube amps are just a bit unreliable. Like I remember we were playing Download, and it was like 2 weeks before the show, both of our Laney Ironhearts went, and we also had a spare, and we were like one amp between two.
Oh.
Luckily, the guys at Laney were like, right, they managed to they collected it, they re-grilled it, they valved it, and they got it back to us I think in like 48 hours.
Damn.
But it was insane. Like definitely sent them a care package for that. Like cheers. But yeah, it was an obvious kind of move. But now like everything's contained to these two racks. We literally we've got two racks, two Enki cases, and then kit and super. Like I mean,
awesome.
obviously we can't fly the racks, but we need to build fly rigs. But that's just something for me to get excited about.
Dude, the fly rack, the flying part of the digital stuff for me was the best because when we were dealing with tube amps, like in my guitar work box, dude, I had so many spare tubes and I had to use them all the time because
I was going to say when you mentioned about switching and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to learn something new. I was like, think about all the time you could save from not changing tubes.
And the fly dates were the big part of it because for anybody that doesn't know how a lot of bands do fly dates that's listening, I know you do. Most of the stuff you get is rentals. You got to find a backline rental company, and these rental companies you would think check and take care of all of their gear, but they don't most of the time. So a lot of these backline gigs that we did where we'd fly somewhere and rent stuff, it's like I'd get an amp that clearly has a blown tube in it and sounds, or has a blown speaker or something like that. So you're always at the kind of will of whatever gear the backline company gives you. When we switched to the fractals, we got cases, rolling cases made that had we had one Axe 3 for a main and then a backup for each person. And we had these 3 racks, but we got the racks built so they slide out. and we had custom Pelicans made for him that all we have to do is like, so literally if we were doing a show, someone like say we were doing a show in LA and then the next day we were flying to New Zealand, it would take me 2 minutes to pull that rack out, set it in its flight case, boom, done, ready to go.
Goosebumps, mate. Goosebumps.
Oh, dude. The first time we ever flew with these fractals, we went down to Mexico for a festival and not having to rely on backline. And I mean, I had these out and set up in like 10 minutes. I was ready for a show in like 10 minutes. And I'm like, this is amazing. Digital is the best.
Knowing what you're getting, even like sound wise, because, you know, tube amps, like, and the same thing, like if the power on a stage is unclean and you're not running like a power conditioner to then the actual tube amps, that can change everything. And like, that was something we used to run tube amps and pedal boards, and like, even with like, you know, good power bricks on the pedal boards, if the power wasn't clean in the venue, like we played a couple which were like under train tracks.
Oh yeah,
you know, it was good venue, but if the power's not clean, the pedals don't perform, they're not getting the same way. So like, and obviously with metalcore, it's all about gate. It's all about having, you know, like, you know, 2, maybe 3 gates. We like, you know, run one before the amp, one in the effects loop, and like if that gate wasn't getting the right power that I needed, it was just sloppy, and that just ruined the show. So like to switch, that was probably the number one seller for us as well, to be like, right, okay, we switch to these digital amps, we can get these, you know, these gates on lock so that they're doing exactly what we want. And like, you know, even like now we can automate all the gates to be removed for pinched harmonics on certain songs. It's just, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
One of the things that I love too is that, so I was teching for the actual country artist and then one of his guitar players. And this guitar player had a pedal board that we called Boardzilla that was like, dude, I'm not kidding you. It was like 3/4 of a meter wide. And like, I mean, dude, if we flew with it, it weighed 8, well, I don't know what this would be in kilograms, but 80 pounds, dude. It was massive. Like
80 pounds is 40 kilograms. That's insane.
Yeah. So it's around there. It was ridiculous, dude. So,
that's heavy.
One of the things I would have to do is on one of the tours we did, we had a massive stage set up. And there were parts of the songs where the guitar players would go on this, like there was like a giant bridge over the drummer and these platforms and stuff. So they're like 8 feet above the ground on these platforms. But the guitar player for his lead part, for the reason he's standing on the platform, is he needs to switch his pedals. So I'd have to like crawl out there and try not to let the crowd see me and start hitting pedals. Like I'd be on my hands and knees just like hitting pedals. So when we switched to digital and you can program those all in, I was just like, yes.
Dude, yeah. I've watched so many of those like rig rundowns and seen like, you know, obviously like techs, you know, side stage tap dancing on like pedals and stuff. And it just makes sense. Like, I don't know, we still use a MacBook for playback and stuff, but I know like a lot of people use the Somatic playbacks, but same thing, you just to run that and be able to get it to trigger cues just straight from like into an X32, that then patches straight into all of the like there's 2 helixes. The same thing about you on about like digitals and like backups. So, you know, we've got 2 helixes, we both play on separate helixes, but if one goes, we have a backup patch on the other helix which can run 2 signal chains, which is the identical clone. So you know what I mean, that you can do a lot of preemptive backups with minimal effort, as opposed to like, you know, carrying 4 amp heads. It's just,
that's what we did.
Not the way.
I mean, I did have some switches in my Guitar World. So for example, if the main fractal went down for somebody and I heard it, all I had to do was step on a pedal and A/B switch it to go to the spare, and the spare was synced up with the other one. So it was like, as quick as I could switch it, there would be no loss at all. Every tour I've been on has been MacBooks for playback as well.
Oh, really?
And one of the craziest tours, I always find it fascinating when bands have dedicated playback engineers. Like, I've only been on 2 or 3 tours where I've seen that, but literally a guy just on the side of the stage near Monitor World that his entire job. But the crazy thing about that is, I forgot what tour it was on, but the playback engineer had to work in real time because this band played to a click and to playback, but they vamped a lot and they would extend bridges and all this. So this This guy had to cut things and move things in real time and restart them for the band at the right time. And that was amazing to see, like how in tune with the band that guy had to be to move all of that during a show.
I don't know whether he's like a genius or he's just got like the hardest job in the world.
I just,
Like, imagine trying to explain to someone like, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to decide when we stop, when we change, and you're going to basically figure out. The thing is that you also need the click to bring you back in. So like, wow.
Yeah, he's moving all that stuff in real time. It's crazy. And then, you know, our drummer for the band, the tour I was on last, like he would kind of do that, but he wasn't editing. He was just starting and stopping when they'd extend bridges and stuff like that and counting bands back in. But this was nuts. It was like, you know, somebody from the band would get in the talk back and be like, hey, on this next song, because the crowd is like really on fire, we're going to double the last chorus and let them sing. So I need you to double the chorus on the tracks. And he'd literally have to sit there on the fly in the moment, copy and paste, double that chorus for the tracks. So the tracks were still there.
Mad. Yeah, I mean, that is crazy. That's a crazy amount of like, but I suppose at the end of the day, it's someone's job, and it's like a lot of risk factor on the fly and a lot of trust to be able to just kind of, you know, with everything that we kind of do in terms of the tracks is pre-programmed, kind of like figured out, you know, any extensions, any kind of like dropouts and stuff, you know, you stick to the code and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But that's impressive stuff.
Yeah. But it's crazy. It's like the technology for live shows nowadays is so crazy. Like I did a tour once that didn't have a lighting director because they programmed all of their lights into their MIDI playback. Like,
to be fair, it happens more and more as well. Like a lot of smaller bands are starting to get involved with like lighting rigs and stuff because it's like, you know, you can do it. It's all, you know, if you got the time. And the same thing as well. Like, you know, you can also, you know, about MIDI playback, you can send MIDI playback cues from the foot controllers of like your helixes and axe effects and stuff, which to send signals back out to like the laptops. You can control that through your feet, which to me is mental.
Yeah.
I don't want that kind of responsibility in my feet. Nah.
Dude, it's crazy, man. The technology has changed everything for touring and recording. It's kind of crazy. Well, dude, I've had you here for a couple hours and I want to let you have a good Friday night. But before we go, for anybody that's listening, I did just want to remind everybody that Deadlock did come out in February. I think it's a fantastic album. Guys did a great job. And then May 24th, touring kicks off. You got dates with Aviana, Spiritbox, Ice Nine Kills. I mean, dude,
it's a bit silly when you say
it. Dude, you guys are going to have a blast. It's going to be so cool.
I'm very, very excited. Yeah, I mean, this is only summer of the year. You know what I mean? This is 3 months after the album release. I'm very, very excited to see kind of what happens. But yeah, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate you taking the time out to have a chat.
Of course. Before we go, I always like to ask this just for the people that listen. For you, for somebody that's, you know, in the band and stuff, whether it's financial or not, or just sharing music or whatever, what would you say is like some of the best things that people can do to help support either your band or their favorite bands, like right now in the time that we're in?
I mean, definitely merch is always the number one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, merch is the lifeblood of any band. Like it gets invested directly back. All the music videos that were created, all the stuff, you know, that has been paid for solely with merchandise. So, you know, if you see it like that, if you like a band, if you buy some merch, not necessarily you just buying that t-shirt, you're buying the next music video, you're paying to make more stuff for you to enjoy. So yeah, merch, just communicating with bands as well. Like just a bunch of normal dudes having a conversation doesn't go amiss, you know? So it's nice to get feedback and yeah, it's just comment, buy some merch and let's have a chat.
That's awesome, man. That's a great way of putting that actually. With the merch. I mean, really, people I don't think realize that it's like everything that goes back into the band is just being put into something else that's going to get released at another time.
That's it. You're not paying with the merch. You're not paying a label. You're not paying us. You know, I mean, we don't take a penny from the band. Like we've never taken a penny from the band. That literally goes into making more content, more music. You know, if you want us to record more songs quicker, buy merch, because then we'll have the money quicker to shoot the videos. We'll have money quicker to do all. It's the same thing, you know. Like, we get a lot of people asking us to come to America. We're desperate to come play in America. Like, that is number one on our list of things to do, you know. But the reality of it is, there's about a 30 grand overhead for us to come play in America. You know, the visas alone can cost you 1,500 quid per person. So, you know, if you want to help us do that, well, holler at your favorite bands, you know, make some noise about us, but also just, you know, help your band out, pick up some merch, and all of that helps to help us help you. Help.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great answer, man. And I mean, I always like getting the different answers from bands, because they're often similar, but there's also different takes from everybody on it. Like, you're the first person that's said it like that, where like anything that you put in merchandise wise goes back into stuff that we're putting out. And I think that's important for people to hear. I mean, people ask me that all the time. They're like, what's the best way that I can support this band? I'm just like, I mean, that's why I like to ask that question, because I like people to hear it from the actual bands, you know? So, but dude, yeah, I'm go ahead. Sorry.
It's all good, mate. It's okay. I was just saying, from the horse's mouth, I think, is it the expression.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if they hear it from you, there's no other better person to hear it from. So, well, dude, I'm excited for you guys. I mean, if you're in Europe, definitely check out InVisions social media and tour dates. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll have links below where you can follow along, because May 24th, that tour is starting. Then there's summer festivals, all that good stuff. Lucas, can't thank you enough for being here and giving me some of your time. This was fun. This was fun to just sit and talk, man.
Great, mate. Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me on. It's awesome to chat with you.
For sure. And if there's anything I can ever do to help you guys out, especially if you guys ever get to the States and need a hand with anything, I mean, feel free to ask.
Well, hopefully that will be, we'll definitely have to have some kind of meetup and some alcohol-free beers.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. So, well, dude, have Amazing. A wonderful rest of your evening, and thank you once again for your time, man. I appreciate it.
You, man.
All right, take care. Absolutely loved everything about that conversation. And it was wild going back and editing it now, because from the time we recorded again until editing and releasing it, it's been about a month, and I've just forgot how natural the conversation actually was. And I really appreciate how open and real and honest Lucas was about everything. And, you know, these are always fun, getting to know these artists whose music I've heard, but I don't know anything about them other than the actual music, you know, and they've only been a band for 5-6 years now almost, and they're doing such cool things for a band that is currently unsigned and getting so much attention. And I just loved being able to nerd out over gear and relate from my band days to his now, and just super awesome, man. So if anybody's listening and you enjoyed it, go check out their album, man. And if you like the band, feel free to support them in any way you'd like to. Like I said, you can go to InVisionsOfficial.com, check out the latest news, the tour dates, the merchandise, and as Lucas said, merchandise is the lifeblood of a band. So that's always the best way to support these guys. But also, if you're in Europe, be on the lookout for their tour dates, because they are still doing a bunch over the summer. I noticed some festivals on there. They've also got another tour that's coming up. So keep them busy, man. And that's the absolute best thing to do for a band. So one more time to Lucas, thank you very much for giving us your time, especially on what was a Friday night. You could have been doing anything else, but decided to talk to me instead. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, check the description of the video. I'll have links to all of their social medias and their websites and stuff like that. And if you're still on YouTube, you can follow me on social media as well if you would like to keep up with whatever else I'm doing. More reactions are always coming up on YouTube, as well as original content. I stream on Twitch from time to time, which is always a blast with all of you guys because we do some fun stuff. And then if you want to keep up with more of my personal life and stuff like that, you can go on Instagram and tons of other social medias. And again, everything's linked in the description of the video. But if you're just listening on audio on Spotify, Google, Apple, or wherever else, TankTheTech is my handle on pretty much everything. So I'm not really that hard to find. And if you want to support this podcast or the channel, you could also go to TankTheTechMerch.com. Get a piece of merchandise. It helps out future content and everything going on. And I also have a Patreon, which is extremely cheap if you would still like to contribute to the channel. And you get some perks with it too. One of the big ones is you get to see these videos and hear these podcasts a few days earlier than they would normally come out to the general public. But if you can't do any of those things, no big deal, man. Just know that you guys taking the time to listen to this content is more than enough for me. But that's going to wrap it up for episode 13 of this podcast. And I've got some other great ones coming up, man. We're going to have a podcast with Nick Nocturnal coming up in the future. We're also going to have another episode with Maria from Future Palace, which was another great conversation. So much more stuff coming. I'm excited to bring it to you guys. But in the meantime, wherever you are in the world, stay safe, be kind to each other, and I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Back Lounge Podcast.